The judge expected another routine hearing. The prosecutor expected a quick conviction. The courtroom expected a quiet teenager who wouldn't say much. And the 17-year-old girl standing at the defense table already knew they were all wrong. Morning light cut through tall courtroom windows. Dust floated slowly in the air. People shuffled papers, whispering softly. Routine, predictable, safe. Judge Eleanor Whitaker reviewed the file in front of her. Minor charge, procedural violation. Nothing that should take more than 15 minutes. She had seen hundreds like it. Teenagers rarely spoke. Lawyers spoke for them. Decisions came quickly. The clerk called the case. State versus Amara Jackson. The name echoed gently. Amara stepped forward. 17. Small frame. Calm posture. Eyes steady. Not nervous. Not defiant. Just present. The prosecutor glanced at her briefly, already dismissing. Teenagers came through this courtroom every week. Most looked down. Most nodded quietly. Most accepted whatever happened next. Judge Whitaker adjusted her glasses. Miss Jackson, she said calmly, you are charged with obstruction during a police encounter. Do you understand the allegation? Yes, Your Honor, Amara replied. Her voice was clear, measured, unexpectedly steady. The judge noticed immediately. Something about her tone didn't match the file. How do you plead? Amara paused, not uncertain, thinking. Before I answer, she said gently, may I ask a question? The courtroom shifted instantly. Teen defendants didn't ask questions. They answered them. The prosecutor frowned slightly. Defense counsel looked surprised. The judge hesitated, curiosity flickering. You may, she said finally. Amara nodded respectfully. Has everyone already decided what happened? Silence fell, not loud, not dramatic, just deep. Because the question didn't sound like rebellion, it sounded like truth-searching. Judge Whitaker leaned forward slightly. What do you mean? She asked. Amara took a breath. Her eyes moved slowly across the room. The prosecutor, the officers, the spectators. Then back to the judge. I mean, if everyone already believes the report, she said softly, then I don't know if my voice matters. The sentence landed heavier than anyone expected. The room felt different instantly. No longer routine, no longer predictable. Because suddenly, a teenager had changed the center of the conversation, and the judge felt something unfamiliar. Not irritation, not impatience, uncertainty. Because for the first time that morning, she realized this case might not be simple at all. The courtroom didn't move. It didn't breathe. Even the quiet rustle of papers stopped, because the question lingered. Has everyone already decided what happened? Judge Whitaker sat back slightly. She had presided over thousands of hearings. She knew when a moment mattered, and this one did. Miss Jackson, she said carefully, this court has not made any determination yet. Her voice remained calm, measured, but something beneath it had shifted. Curiosity. Amara nodded respectfully. I understand, she said, but sometimes decisions feel made before someone speaks. The words were soft, yet they carried weight far beyond her age. The prosecutor shifted in his chair. Your Honor, he said, the facts are clearly outlined in the officer's report. Whitaker raised a hand gently. I'm aware. Her tone remained neutral, but firm enough to stop him. She turned back toward Amara. You may continue. A ripple moved through the courtroom. Permission had been given, and everyone felt the stakes rise. Amara took a slow breath. Her hands remained steady at her sides. I'm not trying to argue, she said. I just want to explain what isn't written in the report. The sentence landed differently. Not defensive, not emotional, just honest. Judge Whitaker nodded. Go on. Amara glanced briefly toward the officer seated near the prosecution table, then back to the judge. The report says I was obstructing, she said. Yes, Whitaker replied. That is the allegation. Amara nodded. But it doesn't say why I spoke, she added. The room grew quieter, if that was possible. The defense attorney leaned forward slightly now, interested, surprised. And why did you speak? The judge asked gently. Amara hesitated for just a moment, choosing her words carefully. Because someone needed help, she said. The sentence hung in the air, simple, yet powerful. The prosecutor frowned. The officer's report indicates that you interfered with lawful instructions. Again, Whitaker raised her hand. Counsel, she is answering my question? The authority in her voice shifted the balance instantly. Amara continued. I wasn't trying to interfere, she said quietly. I was trying to protect someone. The word protect changed everything. The judge felt something move inside her. Because now, this wasn't just about a rule. It was about intention. What were you protecting? Whitaker asked. Amara met her eyes directly. A younger girl, she said. She was scared, and nobody was listening to her. The courtroom stilled completely, because suddenly, the narrative had changed, and the quiet teenager everyone expected to remain silent had become the center of the room. The silence felt heavier now, not empty. Full. Every person in the courtroom sensed the shift. What began as a routine hearing had become something else entirely. Judge Whitaker leaned forward slightly, her attention fully on Amara now, not the file, not the schedule, just the girl standing calmly before her. You said you were protecting someone, the judge said gently. Yes, Your Honor. Explain. Amara nodded slowly. She didn't rush, didn't dramatize. She spoke like someone who had thought about this moment carefully. There was a younger girl, she said. She was crying. The words landed quietly, but the emotional tone of the room changed instantly. The officers were speaking to her, Amara continued, but she looked scared, like she didn't understand what was happening. The prosecutor shifted, preparing to respond, but Whitaker's focus remained on Amara. And what did you do? The judge asked. I asked if she was okay, Amara said simply. A few spectators exchanged glances. The statement sounded harmless, almost small. The officer told me to step back, she continued. And I did. The judge nodded slowly. That aligns with the report. Amara inhaled gently. But then the girl started crying harder, she added, and nobody was explaining anything to her. The courtroom grew still, because now the story felt human, not procedural. What happened next? Whitaker asked. Amara's eyes softened slightly. I told her she was going to be okay, she said. And I asked the officer if someone could explain what was happening so she wouldn't be scared. The prosecutor leaned forward quickly, and that's when you refused a lawful order. Whitaker raised her hand again. Let her finish, Amara continued calmly. The officer said I was interfering. Her voice didn't carry anger, just clarity. And then I was told to leave. And you didn't? Whitaker asked. Amara shook her head gently. I stepped back, she said, but I kept talking to the girl. The judge glanced down at the report again. Obstruction, interference, non-compliance, words that once felt clear. Now they felt incomplete. What made you believe it was necessary to continue? Whitaker asked. Amara hesitated, then answered softly. Because sometimes rules don't see fear, she said, but people should. The sentence landed like a quiet shockwave. The entire courtroom felt it. Even the prosecutor sat back slightly. Judge Whitaker felt something unexpected. Not disagreement, not agreement, reflection. Because for the first time, she realized she wasn't just hearing testimony. She was witnessing perspective. And perspective had power. The courtroom remained completely still. Even the quiet hum of the air vents felt louder, because something subtle had changed. Authority wasn't just speaking anymore. It was listening. Judge Whitaker rested her hands on the bench. Her eyes moved slowly between Amara and the officers seated at the prosecution table. For years, she had learned to read people quickly, but today felt different, because the clarity in Amara's voice didn't match the accusation written in the report. "You continued speaking after being instructed to step back," the judge said calmly. "Yes, Your Honor," Amara replied. No hesitation, no denial, just honesty. "And you understood that could be interpreted as interference?" "Yes." The agreement surprised the room. No excuses, no defensiveness, just acceptance. "Then why continue?" Whitaker asked. The question felt heavier now, not procedural, personal. Amara paused, thinking carefully. "Because she needed someone to see her," she said quietly. The sentence echoed. The prosecutor leaned forward again. "Your Honor, emotional intent does not change the legal standard." Whitaker lifted her hand gently. "I am aware of the legal standard, counsel." Her voice remained calm, but carried enough authority to quiet the room instantly. She turned back to Amara. "You believed your presence was helping?" "Yes." "How?" Amara swallowed. "She stopped crying when I talked to her," she said, "and she held my hand." The image settled into the courtroom like a weight. A few spectators shifted uncomfortably, not because they disagreed, because they felt something. The judge nodded slowly. "And the officer?" "He told me to leave again," Amara said, "and then I was arrested." The words were simple, but the room felt heavier. Judge Whitaker looked toward the officer now. "Officer Daniels," she said gently, "is this sequence accurate?" The officer straightened. "Yes, Your Honor." She refused repeated commands and was interfering with a lawful detention. His voice sounded firm, professional, but something beneath it felt less certain now. Whitaker nodded, then looked back at Amara. "You understand why officers need control during situations?" "Yes," Amara said. The answer came immediately, respectfully. That surprised the judge. She had expected resistance. Instead, she found understanding. "But control isn't the same as silence," Amara added softly. The sentence landed like a quiet strike. Not aggressive, just undeniable. The courtroom felt smaller now, more focused, more human. Because suddenly, the case wasn't just about whether a rule had been broken. It was about what happens when compassion and authority collide, and no one in the room felt certain anymore which side held the stronger argument. Judge Whitaker leaned back slowly. Her expression remained composed, but inside, the balance of the courtroom had shifted. She looked down at the file again. Words on paper. Officer's report. Legal definitions. Everything structured. Everything clear. And yet, none of it captured the feeling now filling the room. "Miss Jackson," she said carefully, "the law requires compliance with lawful orders. You understood that at the time?" "Yes, Your Honor." The answer came without hesitation. "And yet you chose to continue speaking." "Yes." Again, no defense, no avoidance, just truth. The prosecutor nodded slightly, sensing confirmation. But the judge raised a hand gently. "Not finished yet." "Why?" Whitaker asked. The word carried more weight than any previous question. Amara hesitated, not because she didn't know the answer, because she wanted it to be heard clearly. "May I ask you something first?" she said softly. A ripple moved through the courtroom. Again. She was asking questions. And again. The judge allowed it. "Yes," Whitaker said. Amara looked directly at her, not challenging, not pleading, just honest. "If someone is scared and nobody explains what's happening, Are they really choosing to cooperate? The courtroom froze. Completely. The question didn't sound like a teenager's. It sounded like philosophy, like experience, like truth wrapped inside a simple sentence. The prosecutor opened his mouth, then stopped, because even he felt the weight of it. Judge Whitaker blinked slowly. The question moved through her carefully trained legal mind. Cooperation, consent, understanding, concepts she dealt with every day, yet rarely questioned so directly. "Explain what you mean," she said gently. Amara nodded. "If someone doesn't understand why something is happening, they're just obeying because they're afraid," she said, "and fear doesn't mean understanding." The words landed deeply, not loud, not dramatic, but powerful enough to silence the entire room. Even the officer shifted slightly, because suddenly, this wasn't about disobedience. It was about communication. Whitaker felt something change inside her, not a decision, an awareness. That this young girl wasn't just defending herself, she was reframing the conversation, and for the first time, the judge realized she was being taught something. The courtroom had never felt this quiet, not during a verdict, not during emotional testimony, not even during sentencing. This silence felt different, because it wasn't forced, it was chosen. Judge Whitaker removed her glasses slowly, set them down beside the file, a small gesture, but those who knew her understood what it meant. She was thinking deeply. The questions still lingered in the air. If someone is scared and nobody explains what's happening, are they really choosing to cooperate? It echoed through the room long after Amara stopped speaking. Whitaker leaned forward slightly, her voice softer now, less procedural, more human. "You're suggesting that understanding is necessary for true compliance," she said. "Yes, Your Honor." Amara's tone remained respectful, steady. "And you believe the younger girl didn't understand what was happening?" "Yes." "How could you tell?" Amara hesitated briefly, then answered simply, "Because she looked at everyone like they were strangers." The sentence landed quietly, but deeply. "She wasn't fighting," Amara continued. "She was just scared." The officer shifted in his seat. Not defensive, just uncomfortable. Because suddenly the focus wasn't on authority. It was on perception. Judge Whitaker turned toward him. "Officer Daniels," she said gently, "did you attempt to explain the situation to the younger girl?" He hesitated. "We were focused on securing the scene, Your Honor." "That is not what I asked," Whitaker replied calmly. Another pause. "No," he admitted. The admission changed everything. Whitaker nodded slowly, understanding forming piece by piece, because now the story felt less like obstruction and more like miscommunication. She turned back to Amara. "You understood you were risking arrest by continuing to speak?" "Yes." "And you chose to continue anyway?" "Yes." "Why?" Whitaker asked again. The word carried less challenge now, more curiosity. Amara took a slow breath. "Because sometimes silence feels like betrayal," she said softly. The words struck the room like a quiet wave. The judge felt something shift deep inside her. Because that wasn't rebellion. That was conviction. For years she had believed that order required obedience. But now, she wondered if order sometimes required courage instead. And for the first time in a long time, Judge Whitaker didn't rush to the next question. She just sat, listening, learning. The courtroom felt different now. Not tense, not argumentative, just aware. Every person sensed they were witnessing something more than a legal hearing. They were watching a shift. Judge Whitaker looked down at the file again, then slowly closed it. The sound echoed softly through the room. A small movement, but powerful. Because closing the file meant she was no longer relying only on what had been written. She was listening to what had been lived. "Miss Jackson," she said gently, "you've spoken about fear, understanding, and communication." "Yes, Your Honor." "And you believe those things should influence how the court sees your actions?" "Yes." The prosecutor shifted, prepared to respond, but Whitaker raised her hand slightly, not dismissing him, just asking for patience. "You are aware," she continued, "that if every individual decided for themselves when to follow instructions, chaos could result." Amara nodded immediately. "I understand that." The quick agreement surprised some spectators. "So, why should the court make an exception here?" Whitaker asked. The question felt heavier than anything before, not procedural, philosophical. Amara paused, thinking carefully. The room leaned toward her without realizing it. "I'm not asking for an exception," she said softly. "I'm asking for context." The word changed everything. Whitaker's eyes narrowed slightly, not in skepticism, but in thought. "Explain." Amara nodded. "The rule says not to interfere," she said. "But it doesn't explain what to do when someone is scared and nobody is helping them understand." The sentence landed deeply. "I didn't try to control the situation," she continued. "I just tried to make someone feel safe enough to listen." The courtroom felt smaller now, more personal. Whitaker turned toward Officer Daniels again. "Did the younger girl calm down at any point?" she asked. He hesitated. "Yes," when the defendant spoke to her. Murmurs moved quietly through the spectators. "And did the situation escalate after that?" Whitaker asked. "No," he admitted. The judge nodded slowly, a realization forming. Because suddenly, the narrative of obstruction felt incomplete. Whitaker looked back at Amara. "You understood authority," she said. "Yes." "But you chose compassion." "Yes." The simplicity of the exchange carried enormous weight, because it revealed something deeper than defiance. It revealed judgment. And in that moment, authority didn't feel challenged. It felt expanded. Judge Whitaker remained still, completely still. The courtroom waited, not for noise, for meaning. She opened the case file again slowly. Pages turned quietly. Legal language filled with certainty. Procedural clarity. Rules that had guided her decisions for decades. But now, each sentence felt different, incomplete, because she had heard something not written in the report. Perspective, intent, human experience. She looked toward the prosecution. "Counsel," she said calmly, "is it your position that the defendant's actions created additional risk?" The prosecutor hesitated. His confidence from earlier softened slightly. "The officer perceived interference, Your Honor." "That is not the question I asked," Whitaker replied gently. Another pause. "No," he admitted finally. The situation did not escalate. A quiet ripple moved through the room. The foundation of the accusation shifted. Whitaker turned toward Officer Daniels again. "Was the younger individual physically harmed during this encounter?" "No." "Did the defendant attempt to obstruct your physical movements?" "No." "Did her presence increase danger?" Another hesitation. "No." The word echoed, because it changed everything. Whitaker nodded slowly, understanding settling into place. She turned back toward Amara. "You recognized fear," the judge said softly. "Yes." "And you responded with reassurance." "Yes." Whitaker inhaled slowly, the weight of the decision building. "For many years," she said, voice thoughtful, "this court has emphasized obedience as a foundation of order." The room listened closely. "But today," she paused, "I am reminded that understanding is equally necessary for justice." The words landed deeply, not dramatic, but powerful. Spectators leaned forward. The defense attorney held her breath. The prosecutor remained silent. Whitaker's gaze softened slightly. "Miss Jackson," she said, "you have not denied the facts." "No, Your Honor." "But you have challenged the interpretation." "Yes." The judge nodded slowly, and for the first time, a faint smile appeared. Not approval, recognition, because the 17-year-old standing before her hadn't tried to win. She had tried to be understood, and that had changed the entire courtroom. The courtroom felt suspended in time. Nobody moved, nobody whispered. Even the sound of shifting chairs faded into nothing, because everyone understood they were approaching the moment. Judge Whitaker rested both hands on the bench, her posture straight, her voice calm. But beneath the calm, something had changed. "For years," she began slowly, "this court has relied on clarity, rules written to guide behavior in moments of uncertainty." Her words filled the room gently, measured, intentional. "But today," she continued, "I have been asked to consider something deeper." Her eyes moved toward Amara. Whether obedience without understanding truly serves justice. The sentence landed like a quiet shockwave. The prosecutor sat still, not objecting, not interrupting, because the room itself felt like it had agreed to listen. Whitaker looked back down at the file one last time. "Miss Jackson, you acknowledge that you did not fully comply with the officer's instruction." "Yes, Your Honor." "And you understood there could be consequences." "Yes." The judge nodded slowly. "But you also believed silence would cause harm." Amara hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." Whitaker leaned back slightly, thinking, not rushing, allowing the moment to breathe. "You did not raise your voice?" "No." "You did not threaten anyone?" "No." "You did not escalate the situation physically?" "No." Each question built something new, a narrative different from the original charge. Whitaker turned toward the courtroom. "Authority is not weakened by compassion," she said softly. "It is clarified by it." The words settled deeply into the space. Amara stood quietly. Not hopeful, not fearful, just present. And that presence filled the room with something rare. Respect. Whitaker looked directly at her. "You have asked this court to see context, not just conduct." "Yes." "And you have done so respectfully?" "Yes." The judge nodded slowly, and everyone sensed it. The decision had already begun to form. But before delivering it, Whitaker paused, because she realized something unexpected. She wasn't just about to rule on a case, she was about to acknowledge a lesson. And that realization made the moment heavier than any verdict. The courtroom felt impossibly still. Not tense, not anxious, just focused. Every person waited, not just for a decision, for meaning. Judge Whitaker adjusted the papers in front of her slowly. The sound of pages sliding across wood echoed softly. A familiar ritual. But today, it felt different. "Miss Jackson," she said calmly, voice steady and clear, "this court recognizes that you did not fully comply with an officer's instruction." A few heads nodded. The law had been acknowledged. Structure remained. "But," she continued, "the purpose of this court is not simply to punish actions, it is to understand them." The room leaned forward slightly. "You did not act out of defiance," Whitaker said. "You acted out of concern for another person's emotional safety." Amara remained still, listening. The evidence presented shows no escalation, no threat, and no intent to obstruct beyond communication. A quiet murmur passed through the spectators. Whitaker paused, letting the words settle. "This court finds that the charge of obstruction is not supported by sufficient evidence of harmful interference." Silence. Then breath released collectively across the room. "The case is dismissed." The gavel struck softly. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. Amara exhaled slowly. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. Not triumph, relief. But Judge Whitaker did not move on immediately. She looked directly at the girl. "There is something else I want to say," she added. The courtroom grew still again. "For many years," the judge continued, "I believed that authority required certainty above all else." She paused, searching for the right words. "Today, you reminded this court that listening requires courage, even from those who hold authority." The sentence landed deeply, because it wasn't just praise, it was acknowledgement. "You did not silence this courtroom with volume," Whitaker said gently. "You silenced it with clarity." Amara nodded slightly, eyes shining. "And sometimes," the judge finished, "justice learns from those it expects to teach." The gavel struck again. The hearing ended. But nobody moved immediately, because everyone understood they had witnessed something rare. Not a victory, not a defeat, a lesson. As Amara turned to leave, she glanced back briefly. The judge returned her look. A silent exchange, respect meeting respect. And long after the courtroom emptied, the silence she created stayed behind, not as absence, but as understanding.